If anyone ever decides to make a movie about the most absurd night of my life, the opening scene should start exactly like this. I'm standing in the middle of an empty train station at night, holding a coffee cup without a lid, while the board above me flashes in red. Train to Chicago, delayed, estimated, unknown. The perfect ending to my day. Unknown, I said out loud. That's not even delayed. That's maybe never. An empty subway bag drifted past me, and I couldn't help feeling the same, crumpled, unwanted, and completely directionless. I hadn't planned to end up here. Honestly, I just wanted to run away, anywhere, as long as it wasn't Boston, as long as it wasn't the memories, or her, or that version of myself I no longer wanted to know. I sat down on a bench, took a sip of cold coffee, and that's when I noticed her. A girl in a dark green coat with a suitcase that clearly weighed more than her decision to leave home. She leaned back against the wall right under a glowing ad that read, "Find your direction." Irony really could have won an Oscar for that one. "It doesn't work," I called out, pointing at the coffee machine she'd been staring at for a while, clearly craving caffeine. "Yeah, but it still seems more honest than people," she shot back without hesitation. Her voice was low, slightly husky, the kind that makes you realize, almost instantly, that you want the conversation to continue. I smiled. "Do you always compare people to machines?" "Only when the machines win," she said, stepping closer. She pulled out a cup, but instead of coffee, boiling water poured out. She jumped back, laughing, so naturally that it sounded less like pain and more like a reflex. "Well," she said, "guess he's not perfect either." "No one's perfect, not even vending machines," I said, handing her a napkin I'd miraculously found in my jacket pocket. "And coffee, if you want it." "No coffee," she said, shaking her head, but sat down beside me. But company might just save the night. And that's how we met. No names, no reasons. Just two passengers stuck in the vacuum between what was and what will be. "So what are you running from?" she asked when the clock struck 3 a.m. "Huh. How'd you guess I'm running and not just traveling?" "Because you look at the clock like it's your enemy. People who travel wait for the train. People who run are afraid it might actually come." I smiled. A bitter kind of smile. "Divorce. Or more like running away from it. Papers signed yesterday." She nodded silently. "I won't ask who's to blame." "Good, because I honestly don't know." We sat there listening to the sound of gulls, or maybe just the creaky wind vanes of the old station, screeching somewhere beyond the glass. "And you?" I asked. "From the future," she said. "I'm getting married in 3 days." I nearly choked. "You're here?" "Yep. Ran off after the rehearsal dinner. My mom's crying, my fiancé keeps calling, and I'm standing on a platform. Romantic, huh?" Actually, I found out he cheated. Cheated right before the wedding. And guess with who? My best friend. Two of the closest people I had at the same time. "Everyone's got their own version of running," I said with a faint smile. "You're running forward. I'm running back. Maybe we just met somewhere in between." She looked at me for a long time, quietly, intently, with that kind of silence in her eyes you don't want to disturb. "Maybe so," she said, smiling softly. 4 a.m. The station was half asleep. The few people who remained looked like ghosts who'd forgotten where they were supposed to go. We sat on the bench, legs stretched out, her fingers brushing accidentally. "Do you have a plan?" she asked. "I used to," I said. "Now it's just not to be where it hurts." "Good plan." "And you?" "I don't know. Maybe I just wanted to see what a night looks like when no one's waiting for you." She pulled an old receipt out of her pocket from the wedding rehearsal and tried to fold it into a paper airplane. "Think it'll make it to Chicago?" "If the wind's right, sure." We launched it into the air and it flew across the station, right over a passing security guard who pretended not to notice. A small rebellion against reality. "Can I ask your name?" I finally dared. "Only if you promise to forget it by sunrise." "Deal." "Sarah." Perfect name for a girl running from the future. "And yours?" "Michael." Perfect for a guy afraid of the past. We both laughed, and something shifted in that laughter, as if the station suddenly came back to life. Then the lights flickered. The board lit up. "Train to Chicago, now boarding." She looked at me. "Looks like your train's here." "And yours?" "Mine, well, like me, it hasn't quite decided what to do yet." I stood there, frozen, and she smiled, the kind of smile people give when they know something is about to happen that will change everything. "Come on," Sarah said. "Walk me to my future, and I'll walk you to your forgetting. I don't really care where I'm going, so I can ride with you on your train, at least to the first stop. Then I'll switch." So Sarah and I boarded my train, a car with soft seats, the smell of coffee and old newspapers hanging in the air. It felt strange, no passengers around. Just us, the low hum of the air conditioner, and the rhythmic clatter of the rails, growing steadier and louder like the heartbeat of someone who just remembered they're alive. "You do realize," she said, "that you just got on a train with a bride running away from her own wedding that's supposed to happen the day after tomorrow. And you realize you're sitting next to a guy who ran away from a divorce and didn't even grab his phone charger. Sounds like we're the perfect pair of disasters." I laughed. Her irony wasn't sharp, it was protective, like she was joking to keep from admitting she was scared. We rode in silence for about 20 minutes. The train slid through the night, station lights flashing by like signals from another world. Then Sarah suddenly asked, "How did you know it was over?" "You know," I said, "when people fight, that's not the worst part. The worst part is when it goes quiet. Emily and I lived in silence for 3 months. One morning I woke up and realized I couldn't even remember what her laugh sounded like." Sarah listened carefully, not with pity, but with honesty. "I think weddings are their own kind of silence," she said after a pause, "just the opposite kind. Everyone's talking, smiling, taking pictures, and inside your head all you can hear is, 'How could you?' That's exactly how I imagined my wedding 2 days from now." "And you ran away." "And I stayed. So we both screwed up? Or maybe we both did something very right." The train suddenly jerked to a stop. We both lurched forward, and someone from the crew shouted something over the intercom, muffled, intelligible. "What happened?" I leaned toward the window. Outside, darkness, snow, and an old half-buried sign lost in the woods, Millbrook. "This isn't Chicago," Sarah said dryly. "No kidding." The lights flickered, then went out. A few seconds later, they blinked back on. The train wasn't moving. "Looks like a new adventure," I said. "Don't tell me you're about to romanticize a train breakdown." "Hey, it's a chance to see if fate really has a sense of humor." She laughed. "Fine, but if this is a movie, I'm calling dibs on a campfire scene. No bears." A conductor appeared in the aisle, tired, grumpy, wearing a vest that looked like it had survived a few centuries. "Train stuck. 3, maybe 4 hours minimum. No one leaves, no signal." "Perfect," Sarah muttered. "Even Wi-Fi's running away from the future." I smiled and pulled out my phone. 2% battery. Fantastic! Maybe it's time to talk about something meaningful. "Sure, like why coffee machines betray women?" She laughed again, but then her voice softened. "If tomorrow all of this disappears, if we go our separate ways and forget, will you regret it?" "No," I said quietly, "because it's the first thing that's felt real in a year." Silence. The kind that makes even the rails sound softer. Sarah leaned closer, her gaze direct, no masks this time. We're just two random platforms crossing paths, right? Maybe. But tonight, I think I'm finally at the right one. She opened her mouth to say something, but right then, the train door slid open with a sharp hiss. A female conductor stood in the doorway, holding a radio. "You two, lucky break. There's a shuttle bus to the next town. Last one tonight. Station's about 15 minutes down the track. If you miss it, you're sleeping here." We both jumped up at once. "Let's go," Sarah said. "I'm not nearly romantic enough to spend the night on a haunted train." We didn't walk, we ran, like kids, running and holding hands. Maybe to someone watching, we looked like two people who'd known each other for 100 years, or like a married couple on some spontaneous adventure. But we didn't care. We just needed to make that bus. The cold slapped our faces. The air smelled like snow and diesel. The bus waited ahead, headlights cutting through the darkness. Inside, it was warm, faintly smelling of coffee and wet coats. We took the very back seats, tucked into a corner. Sarah pulled out her earbuds, but didn't put them in. She just held them in her hands. "You know," she said, "sometimes I think life is nothing but transfers. We keep running from one thing to another, and only in between do we really exist." "Or maybe the in-between is life," I said. "We just keep confusing it for the wrong direction." She looked out the window, trees flickering by like frames from an old film. "If I could," she whispered, "I'd stay at this stop forever, the one where no one asks who you're supposed to be." "Maybe we already are," I said. "Maybe this bus is just the dream part." She smiled, and for the first time I noticed, her eyes weren't sad. They were alive. Maybe for the first time in a long while. The ride stretched on. When the bus finally slowed, the driver called out, "Last stop, Springdale." We stepped out. A small town, a few streetlights, and one open cafe glowing under a neon sign, "Open all night." "Maybe fate really does have a sense of humor," Sarah said, "or just good taste in pit stops." She nodded. "All right, Michael, if this is a dream, let's at least have coffee in it." And we walked into the cafe, two strangers running in opposite directions, who somehow ended up at the same stop. Dawn came quietly, like an unexpected guest who doesn't ask for permission. Fragile light seeped through the cafe windows, painting long shadows across the floor. Springdale streets were still asleep, and we sat by the window, sipping hot coffee, in no hurry to return to reality. "You know," Sarah said, stirring her cup with a spoon, "sometimes I think the night was the real thing, and mornings just a test, to see if it actually happened." "Maybe," I said, watching how the light caught in her hair, feeling this strange, almost desperate wish to keep the moment from ending. "Want me to tell you the best way to find out?" "And what's that?" "Don't rush. Don't think about trains, weddings, divorces. Just be here." She smiled and leaned a little closer. Her laugh came out soft again, almost secret. "Michael, you do realize that soon we'll both go back to our own lives." "I do." I took a breath, heavier than usual. "And yet, imagine if we stayed at one stop a little longer." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes followed something outside the window, a lone car passing, the first sign of morning movement. Then she looked back at me, and her gaze caught the light just so. "What if we stayed without a reason?" she said quietly, "just because it feels right here." "We could try," I whispered. We stepped out into the street. The cold morning bit through our coats, but it didn't seem to matter. The snow crunched beneath our feet, and the whole town smelled of freshness, coffee, and something faint but undeniable, something you could almost call possibility. "Michael," Sarah said, looking up, "you've never really told me the whole truth about yourself. just little pieces, like a puzzle. Maybe, I said, because I was afraid someone might put the puzzle together wrong. And now I'll ask you, are you ready to take a risk? A risk? Yes, to become part of not your old escape, but something that could be. I paused. The past, the divorce, everything that had been pulling me backward. And suddenly it hit me. This small night, this random delay at the station might just be the point where something new begins. All right, I finally said, let's take the risk. She smiled, as if she'd been waiting for that answer all night. Then stay on the platform a little longer, Michael. We both ran away from our lives. Maybe, for once, we found one we don't have to run from. We walked down the snowy street, unhurried, not knowing where the road would lead. Every step felt important and yet light. It was as if the whole world had paused for a moment, just to let us exist side by side. You know, Sarah said, maybe this is the miracle, the night, the train, the snow, and us. I'd add coffee to that, I smiled, but it doesn't really matter anymore. We laughed quietly, without exaggeration, and that laughter became a bridge, one that could take us from running away to simply living. Are you scared? She asked. A little, but not like before. This kind of fear, it doesn't paralyze you. It pulls you forward. She squeezed my hand. Then forward, Michael, wherever we go next. This platform is ours. And though the dawn crept in slowly, we both felt that time was no longer our enemy. The trains that were supposed to take us away didn't decide anything anymore. The only road left was step by step, together, into a new day. Sarah, I whispered, maybe this is the most real date I've ever had. And mine, she smiled, with that kind of honesty you wish you could bottle forever. We were already at the railway station, walked to the end of the platform, then down the snowy road, not knowing if it was the city ahead or just an extension of our night. And for the first time in a long while, I realized that being here, right now, next to someone who had also been running from life, wasn't an escape. It was finally coming home. And though the whole world still waited ahead, full of choices, losses, and new beginnings, we stood on our own platform, together. The night was gone, the trains had departed, but we stayed. And somehow, that was enough. The end? Maybe. Or maybe just the beginning.